Well, as Mark said, good morning, everyone. Today, we're actually not going to be talking about our friend Versiv, but it is going to play an important part in our presentation. The reason it's going to play an important part is there's a network port here. I can plug my cable tester into the network and connect to the network. Can use that to download test results. And today, we're going to use it to answer the question of, is this cable working? And the most basic way that we check to see if that cable is working is, hey, look at that, link lights. That suggests we have continuity from here to there. But what if we were to use this other cable? Well, when I plug this other cable in, maybe the link light is burned out on the network interface card. I don't know, but I suspect there's a problem with the cabling. So what I want to talk about today is one of our simpler and more practical cable testers. This is the Fluke Network's Microscan EoE. It comes with this little hat that's actually a Terminator that we can use if we want to do a wire map of a cable. This product serves a number of useful features, and what we're going to try to do today is walk through a couple of them. So we've seen our problem. We don't have a network connection, and we want to find out the distance to where the problem is. So here we can see that the cable is open 20 feet away, but if you'll notice, this 3-6 pair doesn't quite have as many segments as the 4-5 and 7-8. This magnifying glass, so there's 18 feet, the 3-6 pair is open 9 feet away. That seems like we have a problem. Let's take a look 9 feet down our cable. Well, I didn't use a shorter patch cord, but such is life. So basically what we're going to do here is look at the outlet underneath our desk. And what we can see, oh no, I've been moving this around too much, and these two conductors are open. Now, before I punch those down, I want to show another interesting feature, and that is which port on the patch panel are we attached to? You'll notice that someone has not labeled the outlet, so I don't know where it's going. So if I wanted to fix my problem of no network and patch myself into the switch, I need to find which port on the patch panel I'm attached to. So within the Microscan EoE, we have this very useful tone button here, and we're going to send a tone down the cable. There we are, sending a tone down the cable. Now, we're going to use this IntelliTone to try and find which port of the patch panel we're attached to. So I've been playing with this, and I've had some fun where I noticed that if you wrap a cable that's actively toning around yourself and try and find where the cable's going, the tone is going everywhere. So anyways, we're going to look and try to find where the signal gets stronger on the cable. And it's kind of a wash. It looks about the same. So I'm going to move to the second position where we narrow down the search, and we again are going to look for the strongest signal. Now granted, you may actually end up inserting this tip into the port, but you don't get a good angle for the camera. So as I go along, I'm still not getting a lot. This one and this one seem to have more signal, and these two seem to have less signal. So it's between those two. So now what I'm going to do is switch to this cable map position, and we're going to take advantage of this port on the bottom of our toner. We're going to plug in our trusty cable here. And if there is a question, how many yellow patch cords do I have? It's a lot. So when we plug in here to the bottom, that is not the port that we're attached to. Let's unplug from this bottom one, and remember we were also getting a good signal from this top port. And look here, we're going to go through the sequence. 3 and 6 are open, however, and it's telling us I have a problem with the 3 and 6 conductors on this cable. All right, so we found the port on the patch panel that we correspond to. Now we need to take care of this problem that we have on the cable because, well, 3.6 is pretty important for Ethernet. So what we're going to do here is break out our trusty Fluke Networks IS60 termination tool. I have a punch down tool, pair of snips, deadly snips. Don't try these at home. And of course, a cable stripper. With some luck, I left myself enough slack on these two conductors. We'll keep track to try and punch them down into the right slots. And there we go. So make sure we've got the blade facing out and give that a quick punch down. All right. And now, hey, look at that. All the cables seem to have the same distance. Now, we've got a couple of other examples of what we can do here. The first thing that we want to do is find out the speed of our connection. No, that was not a part of the demonstration. All right.
Jim always says we do these live, and people like to watch them for the same reason they watch NASCAR races, because they're waiting.
See the camera fall off? Part of NASCAR I haven't seen before. All right. So when I plug in here, we can find out if I'm patching myself into the switch. And look at that. We are patching into the switch, and this is actually kind of a fancy switch port because it's offering us 2.5, 5 gig, and even 10 gig. I'm attached to a pretty high-speed network connection here. Now, another great feature of the Microscanner PoE is it will tell us if we have power over Ethernet being offered on the port. And it's not finding PoE on this port because this port doesn't offer PoE. So I'm going to need to find another port to plug into that has my, well, the PoE that I'm looking for. Let's try switching out this cable and patching in to a different switch port. Now here I'm just changing to different switch ports, and now we're going to push the PoE button. And when we push the PoE button now, it tells us, try and avoid getting all the reflections I can here. Hey, look at that. We're getting class 4 25.5 watts of PoE. Now, all that I'm doing is talking to the switch, and I'm saying, switch, what could you offer me? I'm not trying to draw that down. I'm not measuring whether this cable is capable of supporting that voltage. Again, I'm checking to see, is the switch offering me what I need? So we've done some interesting steps here. We've seen what it looks like when we're disconnected. We found the distance to an open, and we've even toned it out. Now, I know that we'll come across this situation a couple of different times where we may not have all the ports labeled on our patch panel. Here, some of them are labeled, and here, some of them are not. It's a very unusual patch panel. It actually goes from this side to this side, but that's going to work great for our next demonstration. You may have noticed that when we were doing the identification of the cable, let's put our patch cord back here for a moment. When we're doing our identification of the cable, it's telling us that this Terminator is, go back to the home screen here, this is Terminator number 1. There we go. Yes, that is the battery light flashing in the background. Let's see how long this will last for. It wasn't my intention to change batteries. Now, the other thing that's interesting is I can use multiple Terminators. So if I have multiple outlets I need to identify, say I need to identify this one, and this one. Now, this could actually be in your home network where you may have multiple ports available in your house, and you're trying to find out which port in your house is connected to which port on the switch. Or not your house, someone else's house where you've been hired to fix the network. So let's plug in here, and this should, notice I'm not even pushing a button, this should work to identify that connects to number 3. And here is number 3 at the far end. We can do the same thing to identify ports 4 and 5. Now, before I finish, I did want to show one other interesting port, and that will be this cable here. An open pair is a simple problem. It's a common problem. It's very helpful to find the distance to the problem, but sometimes our cabling is just wrong. And the Microscanner PoE can identify all types of different cabling problems, not just in open, but also flipped pairs. And something that is really one of the most insidious cabling problems, and that is a split pair. You see, it's giving us a warning here, and it's telling us there's a split between the 3/6 and the 7/8 pair. What is a split pair, you ask? Great question. Let's jump over to this photograph here. This is from our friend, the DSX 8000. And what's tricky about this is conductor 6 is terminated to conductor 6, and conductor 7 is terminated to position 7. However, 7 and 8 are not a pair. 3 and 6 are not a pair. We have flipped by mistake the 6 and the 7 conductors, and those are not laid out as a pair. If we are not using a pair, we don't get the benefits of not radiating a signal out of the cable, and we don't get the benefits of immunity to external noise that may be affecting us. So we've been taking a look at the Microscanner PoE, and I wanted to show you here on our webpage, flukenetworks.com, we have, hey, our PoE tester, the Microscanner PoE. Now, this is just a simpler product, but in the day-to-day of keeping networks up and running, I travel with one because it is so practical when we're trying to find, we're at a trade show, we need to find out if the network's working. This will help to tell us if we have a network or the distance to where it is, and certainly help you at anyone's desk. From our where to buy button, hey, we could go today to many of our distributors and place an order. We don't have to go to a store, get this delivered to your location expeditiously. Folks, that is our short snack size webinar for today. Again, we're using the Microscanner PoE to identify which port of a patch panel we're attached to and whether or not that port has a switch attached to it. And with that, Mark, I think you had one more question for the people out there.
Let me pull up one question. This is a good one, and I think we get this pretty often. I'll throw this one at you, Jim. If your cabling is not properly labeled and cabled and connected to the switch, this customer uses a link runner, and we all know and love that product, even though that's not a product we sell. They use it to try and tone to the patch panel. But if it's patched to the switch, I can't find the cable. What should I do?
Okay, so if we are trying to tone on a link that is active, different switch ports are going to treat that signal in different ways. And sometimes they will feel attacked if they're being toned, and they may shut off that port. There's a safety mechanism in the switch that says, don't send me a signal. So they'll block that out. So it can be really tricky to tone into a switch. I may, if I am able to get a signal on the cable, I may drop my IntelliTone, not find it, but I may follow along the cable to see if, here we go, I may follow along the cable back here to see if I can find it, or if we cabled properly and we put 2 outlets at each desk and we're not using the second outlet, you might tone on the second outlet to try and find that. Did you have a different idea, Mark, on finding that?
No, that's pretty much the answer I came up with. There are some products, and he mentioned a link runner that will, I believe, allow you to flash the light.
Oh yeah, the port blinking feature.
Yes, but that won't help you at the patch panel, of course, because the patch panel doesn't have a light on it. Well, some of them do, I believe, but most of them
the fancy
don't.
ones.
So you'll be able to find the switch port, but you won't necessarily be able to figure out which exact panel it is. It is tricky to tone a cable that is terminated, because basically what happens is the termination at the end of that cable in effect absorbs the tone signal that you put on it, although sometimes you can find it. It's not perfect, but it tends to do that, so that does make it difficult. Hey, Jim, here's a quick question. Are you using Cat 6 or Cat 5?
Oh, you know, one of the things I really like about the standard is interoperability. So I've got a little bit of everything here. I've got a Cat 5 patch cord. I've got some Cat 6A cable here. And so for the purposes of what we're trying to show, what the switch is advertising, it doesn't matter whether we're using 5E or 6A. This does not guarantee that it will be working, but 5E, It's a budget question. How much money do you have? What did you find in the factory? So I see a lot of Category 5E. Category 5E is designed to run, or should I say NBASE-T is designed to run on Category 5E. So Category 5 may take us past 1 gigabit. However, when I'm installing new wireless access points that I know are just going to go faster and faster, the standard recommends that we use 6A for that.
Here's another, oh no, wait, any tips on toning Category 6A cable?
I'm going to guess that the challenge about toning Category 6A cable could be because whether we're using 5E or 6 or 6A, we should be able to tone it and we should be able to find the problem here. Now, if you are using a shielded cable, then you may come across serious problems when you're trying to, if you're trying to follow the path of the cable. The signal may not be radiated out of the cable if it's properly terminated. Now, I'm partial to using the IntelliTone, and as I was getting ready for today, I was torn about whether I would show just the IntelliTone or I would also show IntelliTone's friend, the Pro 3000. The Pro 3000 is a great toner, but this works better on single pair cable. It's designed for a telephone network where we're transmitting on a single pair, and it has a slight drawback that it sounds like this. So if I get near any power cable, I get that buzz. We have a new model that can take away that buzz, but I like the IntelliTone for 4-pair, both Category 5E, Category 6, Category 6A, even Category 8, because it has this cable map position and it allows me to map out the cable so I know for sure which cable I've connected to.
Right, and one of the things, by the way, that I think maybe people didn't see it as well, but in addition to just hearing the tone level, it also shows on those LEDs that are numbered 1 through 8 near the tip, it also shows the signal strength. And when you were demonstrating it earlier, I noticed that it kind of all sounds the same tone. I can't tell if it's louder or quieter, but when I looked at the LEDs on there, there was definitely a difference between the ports that were not connected and the ports that were connected to or very close to the cable. And so those LEDs really help you isolate which port the tone is coming through. Okay, let's see what somebody else pointed out that the most common problem is a user problem. And, all our years in networking experience, that's the case. The users tend to break the cables. They rarely break on their own. Another question that's come up is about comparing the Microscanner PoE and the Microscanner 2. Jim, if you don't mind, I'll answer that question quickly. Maybe you could hold up and show them the top of the scanner. Now, this is the PoE model, and the first thing you'll notice is that the coax connector is gone. To put the extra goodness of the advanced PoE testing into the room, I had to take the coax connector out of it. So if coax is something you need to do, the Microscanner 2 would be a better solution for you. But what do you get with the Microscanner PoE? Well, the Microscanner 2 will show you PoE, but the Microscanner PoE not only tells you that, but it tells you how much power you've got, all the way up to class 8, which is the sourcing of 90 watts of power. I think maybe Jim will give us a demonstration of that there. It'll also show you dual signature power, which pairs the power as well. So definitely much more information there. Yeah, you can see that's a class 4. It's offering 25.5 watts of PoE. So you get a lot more information. The new 802.3 BT standard, where you can source higher power, you're going to start running into devices that need more power than old style PoE can offer, and the Microscanner PoE will tell you if you've got that power or not. Now, one other thing that the Microscanner PoE can do is it can connect to a port all the way up to 10 gig and identify the speed of that port. So the Microscanner 2 stops at 1 gig, but the Microscanner PoE adds the 2.5, 5 gig, and 10 gig connection speeds as well, and will let you know if you've connected at those speeds. So if you've got something like a camera where you want a lot of bandwidth, if you've got a high resolution camera, You want to be able to see that and know that you've got enough bandwidth to support, or an access point as well. If you're putting in a Wi-Fi 6, what's that? If you're putting in a Wi-Fi 6 access point and you're expecting to get 5 gigs of throughput out of it, and you find out the connection is only a meg, you're not going to get that throughput that you wanted. Oh, look at that. There's a comparison, Jim. That's perfect. Another question is about the cable IQ, and handy, Jim. But one thing the cable IQ does will actually tell you what speed the cable will support, whether it's 10, 100, or gig. Microscan EoE will tell you what speeds are offered by the switch. But with the cable IQ, you'll actually be able to test the cable and tell you if it supports up to gigabit Ethernet. And there it is right there. So let's see, what other questions have come in? We've probably got more since I was talking a lot. Here's a question. Is it safe to work on a termination while a run is attached into a switch? For example, a punch down that needs to be replaced, but for whatever reason, access to the switch cannot be achieved. And then, is the answer any different if the switch is PoE enabled? You want to hit that one, Jim?
Adrian, are you on mute? I am less concerned about a switch being enabled and when I'm working on it. It should be, the switch should be able to handle that, and the voltages should be very low. And as with those voltages being low, that should not be a danger for us.
Hey, you guys can.
Hey, it's Adrian.
Hey. Yeah, it's a very common question. We are in the milliwatt range when we're actually transmitting on our test equipment. So there is little to no danger of actually damaging when you plug these devices into an active switch or a switch. There is little to no chance of damaging that switch, so it's nothing to be scared of. I mean, when I say little to no chance, I'm just covering the bases, but in all the years of these instruments that we had and the different variations, we have had 0 cases of somebody saying it took out my switch. So it is safe to put it into a switch and not be concerned about it.
Adrian, the one thing they also asked about PoE, and if it's a IEEE standards PoE switch implementation, the instant that you disconnect it from the powered device at the far end, say the camera or the access point, the switch will stop putting out power. So you're safe there too. You don't have to worry about PoE. The one thing that you do need to be a little bit more cautious about, if you're using something that is not IEEE standard, which could be either the switch or more likely some sort of injection device along the way, those can put out power all the time continuously, and they don't necessarily care that there's a device there at the far end or not. Those aren't very common, but that is something I would be a little bit careful of.
There is also a second element to that. If it is an IEEE device, as most people know, if you got a 24-port switch, the chances of being able to support the PoE power over 24 ports is very little. Typically you can't enable PoE. So there is a feature in the switch ports to provision for PoE to be active on those ports at all time. And so there is a possibility, it depends on the IT manager, whoever's configuring that switch, that they can actually provision the PoE so it's actually transmitting PoE 100% of the time, and it's not necessarily looking for something. I think it's rare, but I think it's worth mentioning. But our equipment here, I mean, it has front-end protection, and if you plug it into something live, it will come up with a voltage warning and tell you, hey, disconnect this thing.
Right. Okay. Here's another question. What range of network speeds will the microscanner PoE report? Will it go all the way down to 10 megs? I'm pretty sure it will, but Jim, I don't think it showed up when you demonstrated it.
It didn't show 10 megabits because my 10 gig port doesn't offer 10 megabits.
Of course.
Starts at 100. So that's a fun feature. But yes, it will do 10, 100, 1,000, 2.5, 5 gig, and 10 gig it will identify.
Okay, let's see. Lots of questions. You know, when you do copper testing, you get a lot of questions. Let's see. So let's see. What is this question here?
I'll give you a minute to read those questions, and I'll show you again. It starts at 10, 1,000, 2.5, 5, and 10 gig. This just doesn't happen to have a 10 gig port on it. If we were to
10 meg.
10 meg port, thank you. Let's look at this cable and see what this cable does. There's a 10. That's thinking about it. There we go, 10, 100, 1,000. Yeah, so here's a 10, 100, 1,000 port.
So Jim, somebody wanted to see, now does that, will it show the PoE wattage? Oh, leave it plugged in. They wanted to know, does it just show that there's PoE or does it show the PoE wattage? And as we mentioned earlier, that's one of the differences between the Microscanner PoE. When Jim hits that PoE button there, the third one from the left, it will actually talk to the switch, and the switch will then tell it how much power it is able to provide.
This one says 0.
Maybe you need to plug it into the correct port of the switch.
If only I had test equipment that would tell me which was the correct port.
Well, that's why we do these live, so people can see how it really works.
There we go. So again, this is telling us that the switch is offering 25.5 watts. It's offering class 4 PoE, but it's not telling us, we're not measuring what the voltage level is. That's a fancier tester. This is just telling us what the switch is advertising for us.
In fact, then another question is, may I ask if the cable IQ can show me how far it is to the problem? I showed that earlier, but can you show that again? Do you have a busted cable there you can show us?
Yeah, how about this cable we're attached to? You'll see we failed 10, 100, and 1,000. Now, oh, there's our blink port light. That's not what we're looking for. Here, let me disconnect this on the far end, which would be... okay, so remember, this has a split pair, and it's telling us split pair. So absolutely, it can find the distance to the problem, and it will also tell us the distance to where the cable is open. If we plug in here, I'm not even going to touch it. I think it might, on its own, say, wait a minute, I'm on a new cable. Or it won't. Come on.
You might actually have to push a button.
All right. I had to push a button. It's still not happy with this cable. You know why? Because I'm still attached to the cable with a split pair. Whenever it seems like your test equipment is wrong, and I can tell it's the cable with a split pair because it has a little tag on here that says split pair.
One difference is when you're out troubleshooting, the problems on the cable are not usually labeled with masking tape.
Definitely an oversight. If your network is properly documented, then yes, you will know the distance to where the problem is. So this is just open on the far end. Yeah, and it's telling us it's 5 meters to where it's open.
You know, if you are using the cable IQ, you'll notice the Discover is pointing upwards, because really that's going to be the most common setting you're going to use on this tool. Because in the real world, you have no idea what you're connected to. And the great thing about the Discover mode is it'll do a wire map test. It'll see what it's connected to. It'll give you the distance to an open if there's a break in the cable or if there's a short in the cable. Whenever I use Cable IQ, most of the time I'm actually using the Discover to just, hey, what do I have before I actually run an auto test?
All right. Hey, here's a question. I think either of you guys can answer this. If my Microscanner PoE is connected to a live, plain old telephone service port with a ringtone, will it damage the Microscanner PoE?
No, the microscanner PoE should have input protection to protect you against even in a more powered line. You shouldn't have a problem identifying that. If it does detect excessive voltage for its internal protection circuits, it will flash a warning on the screen that says, hey, please disconnect me.
And in fact, it will also identify if you connect it to a telephone line. I think there's a little image of a telephone that comes up on the screen. So
a working telephone line is not something I have in the house right now. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Nobody really does anymore, do they? It's something nobody can demonstrate.
Well, somebody might somewhere, but yeah, telephone.
Sure, they're around.
Telephone line
Still
troubleshooting.
sell all those butt sets.
Yeah, and those Pro 3000s to help find where those pairs go. But,
that's true.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another
let's
day.
see. Any other questions that have come in? Let's see. We already got that one. We got this one. There is a question here.
Go ahead.
And this is a kind of a complicated one, and this is one where maybe you'd want to talk to give a call in and maybe talk to our TAC or something. But I'm gonna throw it out there. Let's see what this group of experts come up with. This gentleman has a cable IQ. I don't know if it's a gentleman, but this individual has a cable IQ. They use it a ton and they like it, so that's good. Maybe I should stop here while I'm ahead. But no, I'm going to plow on and ask the hard part of the question, which is, and now where'd it go? It scrolled it off the screen. Everything is now PoE, and the cable IQ is unhappy when I try and tone a connected drop because of the PoE. Is there something similar that would work with PoE?
Now that sounds like the first question we had, if I understood it right, where the person said, hey, how do I tone this line that has PoE on it? Well, that depends on what the switch does with the signal on the far end. And a modern recent design switch may send that signal right to ground and get it out of the way. It may have the circuitry on the front end to handle that interference that it's receiving. Older switches may feel threatened by receiving a tone and may shut down. They may say, for the safety of the switch, I'm going to close this port that's giving me this funny signal. So unfortunately, we do not have a universal solution for toning all PoE switches, as there are many, many varieties of them out there.
Yes, and obviously, if you're plugged into the cable and it's plugged into the switch, and you have your cable IQ plugged into the far end of the cable, there shouldn't actually be any PoE on the cable, because the PoE is only present if the far end device requests it. And the cable IQ is not requesting power over Ethernet, so the power over Ethernet isn't there. So I think, Jim, yeah, you have a point, is maybe what they're seeing is that more modern switches tend to do a better job of getting rid of the basically unbalanced tone that the toner puts on the cable. And so when you're toning a cable that's plugged into a switch, you know, your results are going to be all over the map. Some switches it will work well, other switches it will not work very well. And once again, that is where your cable IQ comes in handy, because you can plug it in to the far end and say, this is the cable that I'm toning.
Or go over here to diagnostics and
Look at that.
blink the port light.
There you go.
That's especially nice when you've got that spaghetti going from the patch panel over to the switches. So you know which port of the patch panel you're on. You just can't find which port of the switch. So we can tell the tester to link and unlink. Come on, focus please. You can tell it to link and unlink, and as it links and unlinks, the light will come on the switch that port is occupied, and then turn off when we're not connecting.
Okay. I'm going to throw out one more of these stump the expert questions, and this may be one we can't answer, but we'll give it a shot anyway. This individual had a circuit that passed 1000 base T qualification on the cable IQ. However, when connecting to the access point powered by PoE, the link with the switch would not auto-negotiate to 1 gig, only to 100 meg. And he says, I think it's a he, until today, we don't know what happened there. Any suggestions on this one of what might have caused a problem like that?
Well, it could be something simple. It could be that the port on either the port on the switch or the port on the access point was hard configured to only connect at 100 megabits, and both ends were not set to auto negotiate, which is why it fixed that way. It could be that there was a more complex problem with the cable where the cable was not well balanced, and they may have to go as far as breaking out our friend, the DSX, to do a balance test and make sure that that cable has good balance. We have had a couple of cases where we found cables that they would even pass category 6. But when we did a TCL test to measure the balance, the cable wasn't well balanced and it wasn't able to come up with gigabit speeds. But those start to get into some corner cases and some tricky situations. First, I would check and make sure you've got both ends set to auto negotiate.
That's a really good point. One thing that I often tell people too is that the microscanner and the cable IQ will solve, I don't know, probably 99, maybe 99.9% of troubleshooting problems that you run into. But the DSX does have a lot more troubleshooting capability for those really weird things. And my favorite example of that is the fact that it can identify that there's water in your cable. Now, that doesn't happen to most people, and to those that it happens to, it doesn't happen very often. But if you really need to track down something that's an oddball corner case, there's nothing more powerful out there that can do that than the DSX.
Yeah,
These are where you call a contractor to come in and see if they can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, these are day-to-day maintenance, just day-to-day. Let me get rid of the obvious stuff why it's not working. We certify the cable when we first install it with the big boy to make sure that the only problems we're going to have are these simple continuity issues.
Right. Okay, I think we've exhausted all the questions, even the tough ones. So we really appreciate your attendance. We'll be sending you an email later which has a link to the recorded version of the webinar. And from Jim and Adrian and myself, I'd like to thank you all very much for attending and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.